Yes, I'm still here, Hollywood. Coming up on today's episode, he stepped into one of the most beloved shows in television history and didn't just fill impossible shoes, he made the role entirely his own. Off-screen, he became just as known for speaking out, producing meaningful work, and never staying quiet when it mattered. This is Still Here Hollywood. I'm Steve Kmetko. Join me with today's guest from MASH, actor Mike Farrell. Hello, Mike.
Hi.
Welcome to Still Here Hollywood.
Thank you very much.
Nice of you to stop by.
It's nice of you to invite me.
Oh, please. Like for so many people, you were a part of my television habit.
That's
you
nice.
and MASH. Tell me about the moment you found out you were joining MASH. What went through your mind? Do you remember?
Oh, yeah. Actually, there's a story that leads up to that, if you don't mind.
No, I don't mind at all.
I was under contract at Universal Studio after doing a show there with Tony Quinn, and that show failed, and I was still under contract, and they were trying to find something for me to do. And a friend called me and said, "Why don't we have dinner?" And I said, sure. And I got to his place, and I went up and rang the doorbell, and he came to the door, and I said, "Let's go." And he said, "Well, I can't leave yet." I said, "What? I've got to watch my show." I said, "Okay." So we went in, and it was MASH, a show I had no understanding about. And I was really impressed with what I saw. It was in my mind is still a picture of Gary Berghoff Radar in trying to make sense out of the world when he's 18 or 19 years old, and blood is spurting and bombs are falling, and it was really quite wonderful. So I was duly impressed, and we went to dinner, went back to the studio. And not long after that, a guy, producer there, called me and he said, "I'd like you to, if you would, read a script, because I have a series I'd like you to do." And I said, "Sure, I'll read the script." And I read the script, and it was, don't want to insult him, it was one of those 3 jokes a day, a page, sitcom kind of things. I just said, "Thank you, no. I appreciate it, but I'm not interested." And he said, "You're turning down the lead in a television series?" And I said, "I guess so, yeah." And he said, "Why?" And I didn't want to say, "Well, your show is stupid," but I did say, it's not about anything. And he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "You know the show MASH?" I said, "It's about something. And that's what I would love to do." And actually cut and go back, Burt Metcalf, who was when I was at Universal, was a casting director there. And one day he came up and said, "Hey, Mike, I'm leaving. I just wanted to say hi, goodbye. I'm going over to 20th. I'm going to be involved with a couple of shows over there." And one of them was The King and I think, and the other was MASH. And I said, "Oh, good fortune. Happy. That's good for you." And maybe a year later, this is probably the third year of the show, my agent called and he said, "There is a possibility that Wayne Rogers may be leaving MASH, and they want to know if you would be interested in coming over and having a conversation. There's no commitment, just a conversation." I said, "Would I? Can I? I'm under contract here at Universal." He said, "There's nothing in your contract says you can't have a meeting." So I went, and I met Gene and Larry and Bert, who was then an associate producer. And I remembered being just as nervous as a cat, just scared stiff. I mean, here's something. Talk about wanting to be part of something that was something.
Was that the reason you were nervous? Because you wanted it so badly?
Yes. Oh, my God. And I said to them at one point, I'll never forget the meeting. They were so sweet, very kind, because they were meeting a lot of people, I'm sure. And I finally apologized to them and said, look, I've been around a while. I've done 2 television series. I've done a soap opera. And Bert said, we know you're an actor. I said, I'm just as nervous as I can be because I so admire this show. So forgive me. And they were, generous and sweet and said, okay, thanks for the time. Goodbye. And I said, okay, bye. And it was, I don't know how long, much long afterward, but it was a while. And I got a call. My agent called me and he said, they want to know if you would come and do a screen test, not to see if you can act. They know you can act, but a test with Alan to see what the chemistry would be like. And I said, again, can I? I'm under. He said, yes, you can. You can do it. So I said, okay, I'll be there. And I showed up just as nervous as I was the first time. And they couldn't have been nicer. Gene was directing it. Alan was just warm and charming and sweet. And we did this scene. And I knew there were 2 other actors at least doing the same test. And I left. I remember driving off the lot saying to myself, it's a comedy. You might have thought about being funny. And that afternoon, I got a call, said, you got it. And I screamed aloud and ran down to my car. It was at my mother's house, who lived in West Hollywood at the time. And I raced up to Sunset and to my agent's office and ran in screaming and gave him a big hug and got a phone call from Alan saying, would you be available to have dinner tonight? And I said, yeah. And we had just a terrific time. He talked about the show and his hopes for it and his dreams and his intentions and about the hopes for this character and what it could be, what it could mean after Trapper left. And I thought, oh, my God, I've died and gone to heaven. And the following Monday, I reported to the set. And the one thing I thought was, MASH is thought of as being a kind of family, a group that really cares about each other, and they're very connected. And I thought, oh, am I going to be the stepchild, who forced out one of their brethren? I don't know what's going to. But God, I walked on the set, and the first person that came up, stuck out his hand, said, welcome, Mike. Happy to have you here, was Gary Berghoff. And then Loretta and Bill and Jamie and Alan. Alan and I had spoken, but it was it was a dream to be part of a show like that. And then it became for me an 8-year dream. It was just a fabulous experience.
Did you feel chemistry? Because there's no denying there was chemistry on that show.
Oh boy,
between everybody.
Yeah.
It really was a dream to sit and watch it.
Oh, that's nice. Thanks.
Because everybody meshed so well.
Yeah.
And what's also interesting is you came on and replaced
Wayne.
A number of characters left that show.
Yeah, McLean left, right?
Stevenson.
Boy, that was a big
and then was Larry Linville?
No, Larry left, but later. Larry stayed on for 4 or 5 years after I.
But still, the show kept going.
Did.
And thriving.
Did, yeah. Yeah, remarkable.
And when it went off the air, that episode, I believe, was, at the time, maybe still today, the most watched episode of any series television.
It is the record. It still holds the record.
Still holds the record. Yeah. And that was what, 84 that it went on?
83.
83?
Yeah. It was I have to say it was, well, very different from any experience I'd had prior to that point, certainly. But even subsequently, the first day, day I just said where everybody shook my hand, and they were just sweet and wonderful and kind, and we sat down around the table to read the script. Well, that was something I hadn't had a lot of experience with. Most of the time you walk in, they say, okay, you're standing there, and here's when you're saying, you're pointing to him, and read the script, which we did. And then, so Gene was the director. Gene started it, and Gene said, okay, page 1. And we just started reading and went right through the script. And at the end of it, there was applause. The writers were all there, and some of the producing team and stuff. And they were very kind of nice. I guess they did that every time. Well, I know they did that every time. And then Gene said, okay, page 1. And I thought, was I asleep? Didn't we just do that? And he said, oh, Mike, he said, here's where we go through the script page by page to see if you, the actors, have any thoughts, any ideas, any suggestions. And I thought, I died and gone to heaven.
It was a collaborative process.
Oh, man. Really? You want to hear from us? And they did. And they did. I mean, people suggested, well, this scene might work better if, and how about if Bill did this line instead of me? It was remarkable. And it never stopped being that. It became, for me, a kind of a creative community. They wanted our input if we thought a scene wouldn't work for this reason or for that reason. If we were doing something that the character, that happened a couple of times, have a problem with, we want to hear about it. I mean, it was just, I can't think of a better experience to work, for working as an actor. And ultimately, I was a writer and a director for some of the times. Again, because they encouraged it.
Do you ever watch it today?
If I'm going by, I don't watch a lot of television, but if I was and was going by, I would stop because it's a little hard.
Is it?
Yeah, to see David and to see Harry, who I loved dearly. You will find, forgive me, as we talk about the show, I will get teary because the experience was so profound for me. And I remain in love with the show and with the people and with the experience. So, yes, it's fun to see things and say, I remember that gag and da-da-da-da-da. But I don't make a point of sitting down and watching it from top to bottom.
Mm-hmm. Don't tamper with those memories.
Go ahead.
How aware were you of the shadow that Wayne Rogers was leaving when you came on board?
I was fearful, as I said, walking in, that I was going to be resented by the cast. None of that. There was never a whisper of that. Other than that, Wayne was somebody who'd been there and was gone. Trapper, this character, who I guess left an indelible mark, certainly, wasn't there anymore. And I was busy being BJ. So, but I will tell you a nice story. I didn't know Wayne, and in this town, you get involved in things, and there was an event, and I showed up, and I came in. It was already started. Whatever was happening, it was somebody making a speech about something, and right down in the aisle ahead of me was Wayne Rogers, standing in the aisle talking to somebody. And so I just sauntered on down, and I stood there just out of his line of sight when he was talking to this fellow. And then he turned and he saw me, and he said, "Hey," he said, "I'm getting real tired of people thinking I'm you." And I said, "I got the same problem, pal." And he said, "I got a story for you." He said, I ran into Elliot Gould one day, and Elliot had done the movie,
Right.
playing Trapper John. And Elliot said, "Are you doing me or are you doing the other guy?" And Wayne said, "I'm doing you." And Elliot said, "I like me better." And I laughed and he laughed. And then he said, "I got to tell you, I like you better." I thought, that's the kind of generosity you don't hear from actors who are competing, arguably competing. But that's the kind of emotional connection that we all made in that show. And you just don't lose that.
Is that why you're still a little emotional about it?
Oh God, yeah. No, I dearly loved the people who are gone and love the people who are still with us. Alan and I are very close, remaining so after many years. Yeah, you don't often get the opportunity to do work that is meaningful, that feels good, that is a challenge, and at the same time is a labor of love. I've been fortunately involved in a few of them, but MASH it doesn't get any better than that.
Back with more in a moment. If you'd like to be more involved with us at Still Here Hollywood, you definitely can. Just visit patreon.com/StillHereHollywood. You can support us for as little as $3 a month. You can get our episodes a day before they post anywhere else. You can see what guests will be coming up and submit questions for them. You can even tell us what stars you want us to have on as guests. You'll see what goes on before and after the episode, plus exclusive behind-the-scenes info, pics, video, and more. Again, that's patreon.com/StillHereHollywood. You know, I used to live, I can't remember his name right now. It's driving me nuts. But the character who played Winchester, the gentleman.
David Ogden Stiers.
That's it. David Ogden Stiers, as he would say sometimes.
Yes, right.
I used to live near him, and I was in my Gelson's once in Silver Lake. And all of a sudden I heard this voice behind me. There's no denying.
No.
It's him.
Indeed.
And I turned around and he recognized me. And he said, "Yes, it's me." Well, that's good to know.
Yes,
the entire cast, seriously, just each and every one of you was ideally cast. It's not often that you find, maybe The Wizard of Oz has the ideal actors in each role, but MASH did too. Do people still come up to you and talk to you about MASH? Do they?
All the time. Mail comes in all the time. Still, I've got a pile of mail I'm tardy in responding to. But what I will tell you is that when Alan and I both said, and to Larry at times, that it's harder and harder for us to make fun of Major Winchester, not Major Winchester, of Larry's character, because he's crazy, and it's hard to make fun of a crazy person. And Larry found it the same. He just said, I can't finally play this character any longer, and I have to go. And his contract ran out, and he said, "I'm going." And I remember Bert coming up to us, and he said, "I have in mind an actor that is going to be everything Frank Burns wasn't. He is going to be as good a surgeon as you two are, instead of the hack that Burns played. And he's going to be a challenge to you in every respect." And it was David. And God bless him, he was that. He was just wonderful. He was just a fabulous addition to the show, I thought. And another person, he just became part of us immediately.
Mm-hmm. Hey, I'd like to ask you, I told you earlier I interviewed your wife.
Yes.
Some years ago now, Shelley Fabre. who was Mary on the Donna Reed show, and famously sang Johnny Angel.
Yes.
How did you two meet?
We had, in the business, you sort of bump into each other. We were both working at Universal at different times, and I'd say hello, and she'd say hello, and that was it, pretty much. But I tend to get involved in things, political and social justice things. And in 1980, I was in El Salvador, going through refugee camps and arguing with people who were crazy militarists. I had also agreed to go to San Francisco to appear at a CBS affiliates dinner. You remember those?
Right.
And so I came home from El Salvador and went straight to San Francisco, and I was just blitzed from having had this experience, and walked into this room full of actors talking to each other about acting and movies and television, and I didn't know if I was going to or go blind. And I looked across the room, and there was this face I recognized, and I walked over to her, and I said, excuse me, I just like you to know that every time I see you, I feel really good, and I feel a little calmer than I had been prior to that. And she said, "Oh, Mike, that's very sweet, very nice of you." And because her name is F-A-B and mine is F-A-R, and they did everything alphabetically when they introduced us all. So we stood in line together and were introduced together. And I said, "Is there somebody in particular in here you'd like to meet?" And she said, "Oh, there are two people I'd really like to meet: Walter Cronkite and another newsman whose name I can't remember." But I said, "Oh, gee, good. I hope, you know." And then she was assigned to a table, and I was assigned to a different table, and off we went. And at the end of the evening, everybody was saying, "Oh, good, nice to see you," whatever. And here she came walking. So I said, Hi, did you get to see Mr. Cronkite?" "No," she said, "he got up and left, and I wasn't able to meet him, but I did meet the other fellow. Forgive me for not remembering his name." And so I was very impressed with getting to meet him. And so we walked out talking, and we're in San Francisco at the top of the hill. And as we came out the door, a cable car came up the hill and stopped. And I said, "Would you like to take a cable car ride?" And she said, "Oh, I can't. I'm involved with." And I said, "Understood." And she turned away, and then she turned back, and she said, "Sure, why not?" And we rode down to the Fisherman's Wharf, I guess, and we walked along on the coast, and I just spilled my guts about this experience I just had in Central America. And she was very patient and very sweet and very supportive. And then we ended up walking back to the hotel. Next morning, we were assigned a car together to go to the airport to be flown back to Los Angeles. And I said, she said, because I was going to be speaking about this event or this experience I just had. I said, "If you and your fella would like to come, I'd be happy to have you there," because she had expressed interest in it. And she said, "Okay, I'm sorry, we're tied up." I told her it was a day or two later. And she said, "But if you ever had to do it again, let me know." So it was probably a month, 2 months, or maybe even 3 months later, I was asked to do another presentation about El Salvador. And I called and left a message on her machine. I said, "If you and your fellow would like to come, we're going to do it at such and such a place and time and things." And I got a call back, and she left a message for me saying, "Is it okay if I bring my sister?" And I called her back and said, "Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to have you come and meet your sister?" And she and her sister came, and afterward we went out for a cup of coffee or whatever. And I said, because on the plane down, she had said something about a problem she was having with the writers on One Day at a Time, the show she was doing then. So as part of the conversation sitting, I said, "Do you ever get that problem resolved?" That I was going to say about with her writers. And she said, "Oh, we're not seeing each other anymore." And as she recalls it, she was messing with a fake fingernail. And when she said that, when I asked that question and she said, gave the answer, she said she flicked her fingernail and it went up in the air. And she said, and I said, "Oh, well, that's nice." So that was the beginning of now 42 years of marriage.
42.
Yeah.
That's a long time, especially in Hollywood.
Yeah, I guess.
Did you ever meet Nanette, her aunt?
Oh, God, yes. We were married in Nan's backyard in her garden.
It's quite a family.
It is.
You get down to it.
She was.
Nanette, of course, was a star at MGM, singing and dancing.
Yeah.
One of my favorite movies is the one she made with Fred Astaire, Oscar Levant.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and I can't. And she did the wonderful song "Triplets."
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
We do everything alike. Yes. Sorry.
No, it's okay. She was quite wonderful, Nana, and a character the like of which will never be recreated. We were just talking about her last night because I was showing Shelley a picture that a friend of mine had sent of Albert Einstein. And Shelley said, "Oh, Nan knew him." Nanette got around. She knew everybody. And she said, "Oh, yeah, I have a picture of Nan and Albert Einstein together with their arms around each other." I said, "God, okay."
I've seen pictures of him with Marilyn Monroe. He got around too.
Yes, he did.
Oh, my. Well, that's wonderful. Did the two of you ever commiserate about working on half-hour sitcoms? Although I have a hard time thinking of MASH as a sitcom.
Yeah, it is hard. Yeah, people have trouble.
Because it had such a moral compass.
We were more comfortable calling it a dramedy.
A dramedy, that's good.
Yeah. No, I mean, Nan and I talked about a lot of things, but she was just always on. She was one of those show business people who just never let it be. She was a singer and she was a dancer, and when she moved, it was dramatic, and it was quite wonderful. She was a 100% Nanette Fabre.
And what about Shelley? Did the two of you ever commiserate around your work schedules?
Oh, well, commiserate. She worked a lot after, well, a number of shows, but she did the show with Bonnie, who was one of her best friends, Bonnie Franklin, One Day at a Time. She worked on a number of shows, but she began to feel that, I'm not sure that's what I want to do. And then Coach happened. So she was on Coach for 9 years, I think.
Wow.
And I was, I'd go sit in the audience whenever because it was one of those shows that, not a 3-joke-a-page show. It was a little more classy show than that. And I used to sit in the audience every Friday night and when they taped, and I loved it.
And clap a little bit louder.
Oh, yeah.
You, as I mentioned earlier, you and Alan had one of the great on-screen friendships. Yeah. What made that chemistry work?
Alan. He was open. Because I'm a hugger, but if he'd been not open, not willingness, not willing, not Alan's probably the most intelligent person I've ever met, and he's always interested and interesting because he's interested in whatever is happening. And he's creative. He's a writer. He's, wonderful actor. John Wayne for many years was the Good Housekeeping magazine's Man of the Year.
Mm-hmm.
And one year we were doing the show, they made Alan the Man of the Year. And I came into the set. I used to do tricks on him all the time, play jokes on him. And I came into the set and got down on my knee and I said, "Sir, may I have the pleasure of your company? You are now the Good Housekeeping Seal of Approval, Prince of Lightness." God, he says today that I used to tie his boots together, and it's true. I did. I used to tie the laces on his boots together, but one time he decided he was gonna, because you on the set, you move around a lot. You go to your office, you go to the commissary, you go to wherever, and he's got a bicycle. He said, "I'm not going to be schlepping around anymore. I'm going to be on a bicycle." So I got one of the crew members to put it on a hook and haul it up to the roof of the soundstage where we were. And he came in. He said, "I've lost my bike. Where's my bike?" And I said, "Gee, I don't know. Can't imagine what might have happened to it." He said, "You son of a..." Get it down. We had fun.
Mike, where did your social conscience come from?
I got into a marriage early, much too early and too young, 24, I think I was married. And the marriage didn't last 3 years, and she was a lovely lady, but she was a teacher, and I was an actor, and we were trying to make things work, and it didn't. But I was really wrecked emotionally when suddenly this, I was a good Catholic boy, supposed to be grown up and get married and be steady citizen and do all that stuff, and it just wasn't happening, and I was emotionally in terrible shape. And a friend of mine advised me to go to a place that he had been associated with, which was essentially a halfway house. People off the streets, people out of jails, people in hospitals, people in wherever, who wanted to get straight, drug addicts and alcoholics and people with just other issues. And he said, "This is a kind of a place where you would have, it would help you." So I didn't know what the hell I was getting into, but I went to this place and met these men who ran it. It's called the Manhattan Project. They said it was at least as impacting as the atom bomb. So and the house, the place, I called it the house. We called it the house. The house was on Manhattan Place in Los Angeles. And it was there where we did group therapies and we did various kinds of projects. I came to this place not knowing what the hell I was getting into, and I got to the office before you get to be admitted into the house. And they said, "So what do you want?" And I said, I want my marriage back. I want my wife back. I want my... And they said, "Well, what we've learned in our experience over the years with all people with various issues is that all people really want are three things: love, attention, and respect. What do you want?" "I want my wife back, and I want to get things, and I have to get work, and And they said, yeah, I understand that. But what we've learned over the years is that all any human being wants at base is love, attention, and respect. What do you want?" I don't know how many times we went back and forth like this until I finally got it. I thought, oh, okay, I get what they want me to say, but and so what do you want? I said, "I want love and I want attention." And I started to weep. And I was on my feet, and suddenly these two men were holding me. And I think about it today, and I realize that it was the first time in my life I was ever held by a man. My father was not a hugger. And I was bereft at the point, but they said, okay, you're part of us now. And I was there for a year working with these guys, working with men and women, drug addicts and alcoholics and people out of jail and people off the streets, and just the worst kind of, what I would have thought, worst kind of trash you could ever imagine in your society. And they were just wonderful, wonderful people. And, needy people. And working with them, I went into prisons for the first time because we bought the program to the prisons to say to these guys who were going to get out, you don't have to go back to the old stuff. You don't have to go back to the mean streets. You can come to a program and it can change your life. And that started me into, I guess, social justice work. And it graduated from here to there to local to national to international. And it continues to this day.
Is that where you learned to be a hugger?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'm a great believer in hugging.
We'll be right back. MASH, I'm going back,
Sure.
balanced comedy and war in a way that feels almost impossible. Did it feel risky when you were doing it?
I was in the Marines after high school, and I didn't do service. I wasn't in combat, but I served in Okinawa and in Japan, and I saw kids who had no life suddenly find a life, and some who couldn't figure out how to make things happen and fall apart. I saw some pretty tough stuff, but it was a growing experience for me, but nothing quite like the house. The house was a place that changed me completely, I have to say, from the shy kid I was to the shy man I am now. But I've lost your question. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. The combination of war and comedy almost seems impossible sometimes. Did it ever feel risky when you were doing it?
No, because we always did it with a sense of the rightness of what we were doing, the wanting to heal, wanting to save, wanting to honor the character and the career and the essence of the human beings, whether they were Korean or American, whether they were North Korean enemy or our own soldiers. No, and the writers of the show, man, they did a lot of wonderful work, research about what the MASH reality was, and came up with story ideas that we did about inventing utensils that are now used regularly. They invented them in the MASH circumstance because they knew they needed something that would do this thing, and somebody said, let's try this. But beyond that, there were times they took a reality situation where there was an officer who was a real gung-ho jerk who was sending his kids up a hill to be slaughtered and sending them back and sending them back. And they depicted that in our show. And Alan and I, or Hawkeye and BJ, decided that we'd get the officer who was responsible for that. And when he came in to see his men, we would give him a Mickey, and we would say he's got appendicitis, and we would operate on him, and we'd take him out of action. And they took that from a real situation in Korea where the MASH people did that. And so the guys wrote a wonderful script, and we read it, and we got ready to put it on its feet. And when our page 1 second time goes through, Gene or Bert asked if any of us had a problem. And I said, yeah, I do. And they said, what's that? I said, BJ wouldn't do this. And he said, what do you mean? I said, BJ's a medical doctor who knows that you do not violate a healthy body. He would never operate on somebody who didn't need an operation. And they said, oh, but it happened in the event. And Alan said, Hawkeye would. And I said, I get it. I have no problem with it. I'm just saying BJ wouldn't. And we had this long discussion about the philosophy of whether or not and all that stuff. And finally, Bert said, you know what? We've got a better story here than we had on the page. Let's do that. We do that. We set it up. BJ and Hawkeye talk about this guy has to be taken off. Hawkeye decides he's going to do it. BJ says, you can't do that. You can't do that. And Hawkeye said, I'm going to. And he did. And BJ sat in the swamp, and Hawkeye walks back in, and I said, how was it? And he said it was just ripe as a, plum. It looked great, perfectly healthy. He'll be fine. And then Radar said, choppers. More wounded were coming in, and we looked at each other and said, didn't do a damn bit of good, right? So, that's an example, I think, of all of the things that I've been talking about. They listened, they cared, they honored the characters that we had created, and they wanted to do important things about what happens in war. Some of it not so good.
Are you of the opinion that the writers make the show?
Oh, without the writers, you would have a lot of actors ad-libbing, and we've seen the worst of that in our world. Without the writers, you're dead in the water. We fortunately had great writers, and some of our cast wrote too. So, we had Alan. God, Alan is as I said, smartest man I've ever known, and capable of almost anything. He's just a remarkable human being.
I interviewed him once. He had done the movie Betsy's Wedding, I think it was called. And I can remember thinking after the interview was over that this is a pretty special person.
Oh, yeah. No question. No question. And he, not that he's above it all. He's not that he appears in any way to think he's superior. He just has it. Yeah. Yeah.
And then you see him in something like, I watched the other day again, and the band played on about the AIDS epidemic, in which he played a French, he played a physician. He wasn't French, I don't believe, but he was involved with the French, and he was kind of a jerk.
He can.
And he did it well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Was there any episode that you felt crossed a line in a good way that hadn't been done before on television?
Some of the things Alan did, the sort of freaky, fantasy stuff. But there was one that created an issue for me as a character, and that was evolved out of a very short scene that Larry Gelbart wrote, and he said it was about the Blythe Danner, the actress, played a character who the history tells us she and Alan had a love affair when they were in medical school or something together. very, very hot and heavy, and then they had their part and went their separate ways. Well, turns out she's commissioned to come into the MASH as a nurse for a short period of time. Everybody looks at each other, and we know what's going to happen. And pretty soon, we don't see much of Hawkeye in the swamp. And there's a scene with Alan and Alan and me in Radar's office. I think it was still Radar's office instead of Klinger's office at that point. And he said, I haven't been around lately. And I said, yeah, I've been crying into my pillow. And he said, have you missed me? I said, oh, it's been just awful. He said, do you disapprove? And I said, not my place to disapprove. And he said, have you ever been unfaithful? I said, never. And he said, have you never been tempted? I said, tempted's a different question. And he said, aha, I got you. And I said, no, I didn't say I had been. I said it was a different question. So it was a funny show, a funny scene, and we ended it. And Larry, who had written it, was out there. And I went out afterward, and everybody said, oh, the great scene, you guys had fun, and blah, blah, blah. And I said, Larry, I don't think it's human for BJ to have never been tempted. And Larry said, huh. I said, that's, something for us to think about. And a year later, Gene came up to me and said, you remember that scene you shot and you had a conversation with Larry about? And I said, which scene? And he said, never been tempted. I said, uh-huh. And he said, how would you feel if BJ fell off the Fidelity wagon? And I said, oh, man. It depends on how you resolve it. And I said, okay. And we went on and did the show with where BJ is called by Nurse Kelly to go help one of the nurses who's just gotten a Dear Jane. And he goes into the tent and she's weeping and she's, and this and that. And I held her and she's just, holding me and then talking and crying and looking up at me, and then we kiss. And that's it. So nobody knows, exactly how that resolved, but one can make certain assumptions. And the next scene is Hawkeye comes into the tent, into the swamp, and he says, what are you doing? And I'm busily scribbling. I said, I'm writing a note to Peg. About what? About what happened. Are you crazy? He just stormed at me, tore it out of my hands, and took it out and tore it up and threw it away. You can't do that. I said, what do you mean I can't do that? I love Peg. I'm bereft at having done what I've done, and I've got to tell her. We love each other. We know it. And he said, not in a letter from Korea. If you're going to tell her, wait till you get home and then deal with it, but not in a letter from Korea. And I said, okay. So, it's that kind of stuff that they came up with that I just thought, how lucky am I to be in this situation with these guys, with these people writing these wonderful, wonderful shows, characters.
Was there one episode in particular that stuck out for you all those years?
I think the best show we ever did was one that was called The Interview. The idea was, the premise is that a newsman, a la Edward R. Murrow, Cleet Roberts was a local newsman, comes into the unit with his camera team and he wants to tell the people back home about what the boys are doing. And before we read the script, when they told us what the idea was, Gene came to each of us and he said, I'd like you to write down your answers to some questions in character that will then be part of an interview that you'll be doing. So in effect, we wrote our own script for that show. And it was such a compliment to the actors to be asked to know their characters well enough to respond like that. And we did. And I think the interview was one of the best shows we ever did because of that. There was a kind of personal connection to it that came through. And some great lines. Bill Christopher came up with a wonderful line about how being a holy man. And he said about when it's cold and you see a surgeon cut into a body and you see the steam rise out of the body and you see the surgeon warm his hands on the steam, you think, oh my God. So there were things, little magical moments that happened all the time on that show. Just things that I'll never forget.
Do you ever wish you could go back and do it over? There's never been any kind of a reunion show, has there?
Yeah, well, we did a couple of reunions, but in Mufti, ourselves rather than the characters, where we talked about the show and talked about all those things and answered some questions that some people might have had. But no, there was never a MASH in character MASH reunion. And I don't know if you could have pulled it off, but the wanting on the part of the audience is very real, I must say. That I'm continually moved by the mail I get from people talking about the show and what it meant to them.
Is there one thing in particular that they bring up?
A great deal is the love between Hawkeye and BJ. The two men loving each other and being willing to express it, being to share it. That hug at the end of the final episode and the brief conversation. I hope we'll get to see each other again, kind of thing. I hear about that a lot, and I understand it because it reaffirms for people that it's okay for men to love each other. It's okay for people to express their love for each other. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's something sexual in it. It's human, and I think it's the common humanity of it that was so consistent throughout all the years we did the show. It was what kind of reaffirms it for me every day.
We'll be back in a moment. As I recall, the show actually ran longer than the Korean War.
It did indeed. There's a great story. Sort of, it's not relevant to that exactly, but at one point I said to Alan, and we were in year 10, and I said, "How long do you expect this to go?" And he said, "I always thought 10 years, and here we are." And I said, And then I guess we used to all huddle in a little thing that the crew had built for us, a little hut on the set. And we started talking about it. Do you think it's time? What we don't want is for the network, some jerk at the network to say, "Oh, ho, hum, I'm tired of the show," and we'll pull the plug. Wouldn't it be great if we could have an end of the war, end of the movie, end of the series episode? And talked, and finally we talked ourselves into it, and we told the network and the studio that we wanted to end it, and we'll go to see the 11th season, and if you like, we could do a number of episodes in the 11th season, but we wanted an episode that ended the war, so that we could say to the audience goodbye and thank you, kind of. And I remember a guy from the network, or from the studio, came down and met us in our hut, and he said, "You can't do that. You can't have an end of the war episode." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Do you remember The Fugitive?" And I said, "Yeah. You know, David Jansen chasing the one-armed man. And when David decided he wanted the show to end, he found the one-armed man and it proved his innocence, blah, 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 blah. Well, it killed the show in syndication." And we kind of looked at each other, and I turned to the guy and I said, "It might surprise you to know that most people are aware of the fact that the Korean War ended." And he just got up and left. And they came back with this idea. Okay, if you'll do 11 episodes, I think it was, and a movie, we'll do a movie separate from the last episode that will be the ending episode, but it'll be a 2-hour movie. And we talked about it and thought, well, that's a pretty good idea. And what I didn't know was then they could bury that movie and they could keep running the show, the episodes and episodes and episodes forever in syndication. But what they didn't expect was the movie was the biggest hit that television has ever seen, scripted television. So it's now aired, I guess, a couple of times, 2 or 3 times. But it was perfect. Alan wrote it, Bert directed it, and it was fabulous. Gave us each an opportunity to say thank you and goodbye. Can't ask for more than that.
What was I cannot remember, what was written on the ground when the helicopter was taking off? Goodbye. Is that what it said?
The theme of the script was Alan kept saying goodbye to BJ, and BJ wouldn't say goodbye. And finally, BJ had written out goodbye.
Spelled it out
on the rocks.
Yeah.
And
after MASH, did you ever worry about being typecast as BJ?
I didn't worry about it. I got a number of offers to be BJ or a BJ kind of character. And I said, no, thank you. And then I got an offer to do a show called Providence, where I played a veterinarian, father of 3 kids, 1 a doctor. And it was, I remember my agent sent me the script and I said, this is too good. It's not going to go on the air. And she said, well, they think it is. And I said, this is too good. I don't think so. And she called and said, they want to make a deal if you're willing to play this character. And I said, okay. And did. And Providence was on the air for 5 years. Should have been on for more. It was a really nice little show. But it was not BJ. He was an entirely different character.
BJ was easily the most decent person, in my opinion.
That's nice of you.
In the MASH unit.
Thank you.
Which I don't think is very hard for you to play. Decent.
Well, no, I love playing somebody who has scruples, somebody who has a belief system and lives by it.
And a moral compass.
Yes, indeed.
Do you think Hollywood today is more accepting of activism or just better at packaging it?
Well, that's a good question. It's terribly good at packaging it, and I think, like our society, more willing to accept the people on the fringes who are out there doing the real work. So I think it's both. I think it does a terrible job of kind of being relevant, but except in a few instances. But people in the industry are very, there's this, what would you call it? There's this array of people in the industry, some of whom are really self-involved fools, and get a lot of attention and a lot of money and give people the wrong idea about what being famous can offer you and require of you. And then there are other people who are just really extraordinarily decent, fine, powerful voices who make themselves heard and make themselves known when the time is right. I'm lucky, I think, to be involved with a lot of people who are just really quite terrific and aren't in it for the accolades, but in it for the good that can be done.
Is there anyone in the business right now who you admire?
Oh, God, yes. Actually, Jane Fonda is out there, and Jane is courageous to a degree that's kind of hard for some to understand. But she's not unwilling to risk herself, risk her career, which I think is remarkable. And I admire Alan beyond words. But I think, people, Bruce Springsteen is doing great things. And a lot of other people are too. I should probably have a list in my head, but I don't. People just have either picked an issue or picked an area and have focused themselves on doing the right thing in it. And I find it really inspiring to see that and to meet and work with people like that.
How do you feel about the term liberal?
I am a liberal.
No.
And I love the term, although, it gets beaten up a lot. But I'm a believer in people having the right to be human beings and express themselves and enjoy life. I'm a great believer in the dignity of the human person and the willingness of people to stand on principle in support of the rights of other people is urgently important, I think.
Boy, I've enjoyed this. Was there a moment in your life that didn't make headlines that you're particularly proud of? Is that even a question you can answer? Did it matter more to you than anything else you've done?
No, I think I can't think of anything that, I'm a proud father. I'm a lucky husband. I'm a person known, I think, in certain circles for having very clearly laid out opinions. And I don't mind writing them out or speaking them, and I'm happy to do that.
Tell me, what brings you joy?
Oh, God, living every day, waking up, looking at my wife, talking to my kids, seeing the effort that they put forward. My daughter works with one of the great firms in Los Angeles. It's a legal organization that is pro bono. So it's the only free law firm, one of the only free law firms in the country, and she's an integral part of that. It's my son is an acupuncturist and an herbalist, so he spreads his talents and his understanding about health in ways that some people don't understand. My wife is just a dream. She's a fabulous, wonderful, sweet. I tell her she's the most beautiful woman in the world, and I'm the luckiest man in the world for being.
Sounds like you mean it too.
Oh boy.
She could have been singing Johnny Angel to you, for crying out loud.
It is so funny when we'll be somewhere in a restaurant or something sometimes, and that music will come on. It's like, Oh, my God. Yeah.
Karen Carpenter even did a very nice version of it.
Did she?
On one of their albums,
Oh, wow.
yes. Yeah. Well, when you think of legacy, do you ever think in terms of yourself?
Legacy. If we succeed, we being the abolition community succeeds in ending the use of the death penalty in this country, I will feel that I've contributed to that effort. If we ever begin to understand that prisons don't work the way we've created them and operated them in this country, and really put together organizations that serve the needs, meet the needs, and serve the needs of people who are acting inappropriately in society, that will be something that I will feel good about having been part of. Whether or not my name will be connected with any memory of that, I don't have any idea. But, I was the co-chair for a number of years of Human Rights Watch, one of the world's largest human rights organizations. And there's just great need and great work that needs to be done around the world. But unfortunately, today, a great deal of it is being destroyed in this country by the ineptitude and incompetence and ignorance of people in leadership that I find very troubling. And I'm doing everything I can and doing everything that I can encourage other people to do to counter it, because I think we're in great danger in this country. So, I don't think my name is going to be attached to anything, but there are many efforts that are out there that I've been part of that I will be very happy to see succeed.
Mike, I've really enjoyed this.
Oh, that's very nice of you.
Thank you.
So have I, actually.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome.
I appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
Shelley will never remember me, but tell her Steve says hi.
I sure will.
From
Steve.
CBS.
Absolutely.
Still Here Hollywood is a production of the Still Here Network. All things technical run by Justin Zangerly. Theme music by Brian Sanishin. And executive producer is Jim Lichtenstein.